Okay, so while they're drying, these two side bits, we've got to add these little bracing sections or strengthening sections which the fiberglass rods sort of seat into to help them fix into position for bits that take extra strength, like the landing gear that comes through here, and also these braces that come down onto the nose, which is going to get a lot of impact forces when the plane crashes. So you've just got to align these slots up in the right direction. If you understand what they're there for, you can do that pretty easily. The landing gear rod, the wheel that's going to be out here, sort of on this side, is going to go through the rod and sit down into here. Same on the other side. And then this brace that comes from that little hole that we talked about underneath there is going to come down into here, and so these ones need to be on a bit of an angle, pointing into the direction of there. So we'll just glue those on quickly. Okay, so we've got our strengthening plates in here and a little hole that's going to have these struts in here. Now, something I should point out to you, these bits of carbon fibre rods that are used to strengthen the fuselage are all thinner than the stuff that we used on the front of the wing here. This stuff on the front of the wing is 1.3 mil, and this stuff's 1 millimetre in diameter. It's a bit smaller. So I should have pointed that out earlier. But for these bits to go in here, it says in the manual they should be 131 millimetres long, so I've cut 2 of those. Now to fit them in there, if you have a look at that, they appear to be too long. So what I'm going to do is just push. I've just sort of sharpened the tip of these on a bit of sandpaper, and I'm just going to push these into the hole there and just sort of push them through until they break through a little hole there, and then push them back down in and push them into the foam down here a little bit. So it ends up being in position there, and it's sort of dug in there, and it's dug in here, and we'll put a bit of glue on each end. But what I found is that the lengths that they suggest to cut them off were a bit too long, in my opinion. So I made mine a little bit shorter, but that's up to you. And when you fit each one, it's the same process as at the front, where you've got to kind of push them up in through the foam and then back into here, so that the two ends end up embedded in the foam, and then you put glue on each end. So I'm just going to do that for each of these. One important thing that I forgot to mention before. Remember when we glued this vertical lower fuselage piece in before, we only put glue on the keyed sections. It's important that we put glue, run the glue along the main beam all the way down both sides to give that strength, because at the moment you can see that that's flopping around there. That's no good. Okay, so before I put all these braces in, I'm going to put the glue along the main fuselage. Down below. One thing that I need to point out is earlier I made an error in the positioning of these little round reinforcing pieces, which you probably see. I'll put a note up on the video about where my mistake was. I put them in the wrong spot. I didn't realise that there were cutouts here, and so what I did is I just to get around it, once they're glued on you can't really take them off, so I just used a little bit of plastic and I cut a hole cut a new bracing piece and put a hole through there and just remade those. So you may be able to see where I've made my new one here, and this is the one that I glued in the wrong position. So if you do make a mistake, you can just redo those. Okay, so we're at the stage now where we want to put the vertical upper fuselage section in, and that locates using these keyed sections at the front and sort of 3/4 of the way or 2/3 of the way down. They just sit in there like so. And then we need to glue at the back here, but you can see that sort of flops around a bit there, so we need to make sure that stays square when we do it. So what I'm going to suggest, what I'm using, is a couple of empty card packets. You can just grab anything, but these are light so they don't put too much pressure on the wheels. And I'm just going to tape those in there to form a kind of like a square to keep them upright. So I'm going to do that first of all. So when I look at that, it kind of, I don't know if you can see that from your angle, but it kind of makes it reasonably square. Look, this doesn't have to be dead accurate, but it will make it better. So I'll take that out now and we'll put a bit of glue on. Just going to, these sections here are dry now after leaving them for a while, but you can see that I still haven't glued this middle section along here or the tail piece here. So I'm going to add some glue down here, a little bit of tape to hold it there, and then run some glue up the spine. Next section, as described in the manual, is to fit the hinges to the tail piece. It's called the rudder. So now we're going to put the rudder in onto the back of the fuselage here, and just to lift it up so that we can work on it, just put something under there to stand it off. And you can see that we've got the hinges that we prepared earlier are there. Now you may not have this problem, but I found when I put this bottom brace in here, this one down here, the hole came really close to where the hinge position, where the slot where the hinge goes into is, and I didn't really allow enough room for the hinge. So what I had to do here, if you have a look at the bottom one there, I've just had to just sort of file a section out of it there, just to clear the rod down the bottom here. And now that fits in okay. Okay, so I made a bit of a mistake there. Could have been a much more serious mistake, but I was lucky that I remembered it before the glue dried. And that is, I forgot to take this chamfer out here to allow for the rudder to pivot all that way over there, the opposite side of the hinges. So I've had to cut those little pieces out of there with the hinges in place, which was a bit difficult to do. I recommend that you don't make the same mistake I just did. The next section of the manual states that we need to install these wing fences. Okay, now at this point I realised that I've made a mistake in the way that I made this, these bracing rods for these wing strengthener sections. These extended bits here that you can see coming off the end and going down into glued onto the surface of the foam, they should have been embedded into the foam back here somewhere, leaving this area clear, because this thing is supposed to slip in here. And that's why we had that square edge up on the face there originally, which I didn't realise. So what I've had to do to get around this is just put a couple of cuts into the foam here to allow for those two rods. So I'll just put those in place like so, and you can see that they just stick through. So you can see that I've assembled these wheel covers here. I forgot to show you the process, but basically you cut them out of this this template here, and it's just important to make sure you get them on the right side, that you don't get them around the wrong way. And then they just glue onto those T pieces that were there, so it's pretty easy to work out.